understand this to be a split call? It's not. Point of order, Honourable Rick Barger.
Labor has 4 calls. It'll be the third call which will be split. And it'll be split between the Honourable Ruth Dyson and Brendan Burns.
Thank you.
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Leanne Dalziel.
Mr Speaker, I should be standing here today to say that this is a bipartisan bill that has been through a consultative process that enables us all to have confidence that the Canterbury Earthquake Recovery Authority will support the recovery effort in Christchurch in the best possible way based on international best practice, something that we can find on our own Civil Defence and Emergency Management website. It is incredibly sad that I cannot say that, not for me or colleagues who have worked tirelessly since the first earthquake to bring to the Minister's attention the advice on how to address the myriad of issues that these 2 events have presented. My sadness is for the people of Christchurch who deserve better, much better than this. Mr Speaker, the legislation is flawed for a number of reasons, but fundamentally for this reason. The government has chosen the command and control model, essential for disaster response, but the antithesis of what is required in recovery. And the government has chosen this model, they say, because they are writing a multi-billion-dollar cheque and therefore they have to be in charge. Mr Speaker, as all of the experts on recovery say, what is required, and these are not people who just sit in ivory towers, these are people who've been to Haiti, who've been to New Orleans, who've been to Queensland and now have come to Christchurch. They've said that leadership is vital for recovery, and a leader has vision, has a plan, has an open frame of reference in terms of thinking outside the square, surrounds him or herself with talent when forming the team, listens to all of the competing views, exercises judgment and is capable of making hard decisions. But more importantly, Mr Speaker, he or she inspires others to do great things. That's what a leader does, because from all disasters, great things can emerge. And in my view, if we are to make sense of something as dreadful as has occurred in Christchurch, then great things must emerge from it. And when one thinks of the possibilities that can emerge from the devastation of our once beautiful city and the suburbs that have been ravaged along our waterways and our cliff faces and the valleys below, I look to the Honourable Jerry Brownlee and a government department called Sarah, and it is hard to find the inspiration that I know we ought to be able to feel. Now, this is neither a criticism of the Minister nor the civil servants who will take up their departmental duties. It is simply a statement of reality that the model cannot serve recovery. No other country has adopted this model, and in fact, looking at the lessons that have been learned overseas, there is a real risk of adding another layer of disaster to the disaster that has already occurred. Sarah may be located physically in Christchurch, but the decisions will be made here in Wellington. Mr Speaker, on Saturday the Minister was reported as saying that many of the groups that had formed in Christchurch were well motivated, but the government would have limited capacity to listen to everyone. From a government perspective, he said, we don't want to get caught in a mire of constant consultation and meetings. He went on to say that the government would look to established organisations for business advice on recovery, effectively sidelining the groups that have sprung from the heart of the cordoned-off CBD and who have been critical of the government's position on access to buildings so that they can get their businesses up and running. And that's what's wrong with the model, Mr Speaker. Any criticism, constructive or otherwise, is classified as politicising the tragedy, and that's what happens when politicians are running the show, and that's why they should not be running the show. Today, the Minister, in defending the bill, said the consultation provisions in the bill were misunderstood. What is misunderstood, Mr Speaker, is the recovery process, and it is misunderstood by the Minister. Let me explain with reference to the lessons that were learned from Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans. Much has been written about Katrina, but the most compelling analysis for me was the one that identified the missing story. Understanding what was going on in New Orleans pre-Katrina. People understand the storm and its aftermath, including the involvement of the federal government, but it's the missing story that offers the most important lesson for us here. The missing pre-Katrina story included the historic choices that had been made. patterns of physical development. That's a big issue in my electorate. The risk factors all around flooding. Public risk, community resilience and sustainability. We've just noticed whole suburbs that don't have a heart, that don't have a community centre. These are resilience issues that we need to address as we recover. The lesson that was learned by ignoring the third story in the recovery process, pre-event vulnerabilities, were simply re-entrenched, and therefore the opportunity to reduce future disaster risk was lost. And if we don't take this opportunity to ensure that we don't re-entrench those pre-event vulnerabilities, then we will have learned nothing from the overseas experience. With Katrina, we learned that we need to balance speed and deliberation, and I really reject the statement from the government that this is about the balance that they are putting forward. What needs to be understood, and this is where the Minister completely misses the point, is that we must reconcile the need to marshal the authority of the state, the entrepreneurship of the market, because together they will want to rebuild quickly. But at the same time, that must be balanced with the necessity to plan in an inclusive, deliberative, innovative and transformative manner. And I never heard one of those words spoken on the other side of the House in either of the two contributions we've had so far. And that's why the word deliberation is used as opposed to discussion or consultation. And I use the word engagement a lot because that's what we're looking for. Deliberation means reflection. It means dialogue and it means negotiation for decision making. It doesn't mean that we have to agree on everything, and it certainly doesn't mean we have to hold off until we have agreement on anything. It is not the talk fest the Minister fears. The reason why deliberation is required, Mr Speaker, is because rebuilding too quickly and randomly simply imposes massive long-term costs and risks on society. And when I say society, I'm reflecting on the impact that this will have on New Zealand as a whole. Mr Speaker, what the government seems to be ignoring is that recovery is in fact very complex. It isn't linear. It is a very complex issue. It requires careful planning because there is no one-size-fits-all. I represent many of the affected suburbs. I represent Dallington, Bexley, Avondale, the Horseshoe Lake, Brooklands and Spencerville, and now Aranui and Parklands. What recovery looks like for each of those will be quite different from each other because their needs, their issues, their environment are all different, and that's why they need to be fully engaged in the process of recovery. Mr Speaker, I don't actually regard this as a disadvantage. In fact, it's an enormous advantage, and the government needs to step up to the plate on this because in every single one of those suburbs, recovery presents us with some real opportunities for restoration and renewal. The mistake is to think of recovery as rebuilding the buildings and the infrastructure, and that's all I ever hear the government talk about are the buildings and the infrastructure, which is actually, the rebuilding is actually only one component of the whole recovery process, which demands that we look at the social, the economic, and the natural environments as well as our built environments. It isn't a simple one-size-fits-all. Mr Speaker, that's why I'm saying that because these decisions are going to impact on our society for generations to come, that's why the process must be inclusive, it must be deliberative, innovative and transformative. Mr Speaker, all of the literature says that it must involve local people in joint learning and public decision-making. These are new skills that we can be teaching our communities and learning alongside our communities because no one person has the answer in each of these suburbs. Capitalise on the local culture and knowledge. There is so much richness of knowledge within the communities that I am privileged to represent. Mobilise local capacity to rebuild. I know the suburb of Aranui is going to have no difficulty with the community development model that they have already locked in place over a decade of working within their community. Securing the things that are good for the community and enabling them to discard the things that hold them back. And I think that's the key thing. This is an opportunity to actually get rid of some of the aspects of our communities that have been holding us back. Mr. Speaker, what has happened in Christchurch is a disaster, but we must now turn our attention to looking for the opportunities that it presents to make us more resilient, to make things better, and to enable us in Christchurch to share those opportunities with the rest of New Zealand as well.